Hello, hello. My name is Isan Taylor with I Love the Berg, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our next installment of the History Half Hour. These free history tours are made possible in part by the city of St. Petersburg. We're going to get started in just a few minutes with today's host, Emily Elwin from Preserve the Berg. She's live on 4th Avenue North, and Monica Kyle is going to be running our slideshow today. If you have any questions during our live tour, please feel free to use the comment section on Facebook or the Q&A section if you're joining us via Zoom. We're going to do our best to get as many of those questions in during our live tour as possible. Today, you're going to be seeing a really cool mix of live footage and some slides with historic photos. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to follow I Love the Berg on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as making sure you're subscribed to our newsletter to stay up to date on our next history tour, the latest news, and all things good in the Berg. With that, Emily, if you'd like to go and introduce yourself, we'll get started.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I'm Emily Elwin. I am an architectural historian and a tour guide with Preserve the Berg. And I'm really excited to give a tour of 4th Street today. But first, I want to say thank you again to I Love the Berg for partnering with Preserve the Berg to give this tour today. Thank you to the city of St. Pete for sponsoring this. And thank you to Andrew, who's filming me, and Monica, who is doing all the slides. Thank y'all so much. So today what we're going to do is we're going to read the city. As an architectural historian, one of my goals is to help people understand the city through the built environment. And through that, once you understand your city through the built environment, I feel that we all better appreciate the incredible sense of place we have here in St. Petersburg. We all know St. Petersburg feels different than any other place in Florida. And so much of that is our historic buildings. So today we're going to learn about the history of the buildings, but we're also going to learn about the architectural styles and how we understand these architectural styles. And we're going to do that to read the buildings. We're going to talk, or we're going to walk about a block and a half. That's all we're going to cover. And we're going to cover 6 buildings. And there are 8 buildings. And in this block and a half, we have a great view of the history of St. Pete and how the architectural styles have changed. The first slide I want to show, Monica, if you could show the first slide of the neighborhood of what it basically looked like 100 years ago.
Yeah, I'll get that right up, Emily.
Great.
1 second. There you go.
Okay, super. So this, where we are sitting right now, the slide is actually of 1 block over of 5th Avenue. But it really looks very much like 4th Avenue would have looked like. This was very much the wealthy section of St. Pete. Wealthy folks lived here. It was not nearly the busy street that it is now. It was very much a quiet residential street with some wonderful houses that over time evolved and changed. So that's basically what we're looking at and how that's changed over time. All right, so the first house we're going to talk about now is the house belonging to Ralph and Minnie Villard. So the Villard house you'll see right here was built in 1910. The Villard family is interesting. Ralph actually was a Frenchman who came to Maryland first and then came to St. Petersburg in 1903. He was a merchant. He sold fertilizer and like feed and seed for the orange industry. But he then soon made a lot of money. And then he also was very involved in civic organizations. He was on the city council. He was involved in a lot, and so was his wife. She was involved in the way women could be involved in St. Petersburg with the Women's Town Improvement Association and the Red Cross, because she couldn't sit on the city council. By 1910, they had made a fair amount of money, and they wanted a house kind of befitting of their status. So they worked with a local architect who was only here in the winter, a man named Henry DuPont, and they designed this wonderful Queen Anne style cottage. Now, Ralph, being from France, wanted a house that was monumental, and a monumental house was a stone house. We live in Florida, we have no stone in Florida, so we have to make our own stone. So this rusticated block is what this house is constructed of. Actually, it's concrete blocks. If you look on, you can see it's concrete block, but it's molded to look like actual stone. And that was an inexpensive way to give your house a sense of permanence. This house also has wonderful Queen Anne features, such as the tower, the octagonal shaped tower you'll see over here. And then under the dormer, you'll see up on top, is one of my favorite features as well, as a Queen Anne cottage. We really wanted to have a lot of texture in the house. And so the use of pebble dash stucco. It looks like a stucco artisan took handfuls of stucco mud and threw it up there. And that's exactly what he did. He took a handful of stucco mud and threw it up there, and it gives it this wonderful textural feel. Queen Anne style houses often have stained windows, colored glass windows, which as you can see, we have as well throughout this house. Now, this house is interesting also because this is not the original location of this house. Monica, can you pull up the other slides?
Yeah, sorry, Emily. Yeah,
okay.
We're throwing them up now.
Great. The first one is a picture of Andrew Villard, so you can see a picture of him. But the second one is a picture of this house being moved. This house was actually located just a few blocks away at 4th Avenue and 5th Street, beside of the Petersboro Apartments. And it was going to be demolished in 1978. And thanks to the generosity of Creighton Pruitt and Francis Pruitt, it was moved through with St. Petersburg Preservation. So this house was saved and moved. It became the headquarters for the Junior League, and has then since then been a series of offices as well. So I think this is really a kind of a neat house, and it's neat to see it traveling just a few blocks away. Okay, we are back to the Davenport house now. Is that on me? Okay, great.
Yep,
all right, this house is a classic Queen Anne cottage. Or Queen Anne style house. And we'll talk a little bit more about the style in a second. But this house has always been referred to as the Davenports, but it turned out the Davenport family only lived here for a few years. They were from Rochester, New York. They came down here with their children in the winter. Mr. Davenport passed away a few years later. And so they really only lived here for a couple of years in the winter, but we still refer to it as the first owners, which were the Davenports. So a typical Queen Anne cottage, this, like I said, a Queen Anne house, an excellent example of it. Queen Anne was an architectural style that was very popular from about 1880 to about 1910. And then it basically disappeared. You hardly find any after that. It was a style that really focuses on ornamentation and detail. So there's detail all over this house. And that's what's really important, because machine lathes were finally available. And so you could use a machine to cut all your different pieces of woodwork out of your house. So up in the top gable, you'll see the top triangular gable. You'll see one of my favorite architectural features, which is fish scales. They look like scaled fish. You'll also see just below them in the red, the brackets that hang down. They've got this wonderful teardrop look to them. And that's, again, that machine lathe can make those teardrops. So they're using them there. The turned columns all around the porch are also very typical features. And then around the porch, the balustrade. Can you see that balustrade there? A really great example of machine cut architectural features there as well. All of these features were built or were done through a plan book. So you wouldn't really hire an architect to design these houses. Instead, you would get a book and you would say, hey, I like this house on page number 96. And they would send you the plans for a house on page 96. And so that's how you would have your house built. So this is one of the few remaining Queen Anne houses we have in the city. And like I said, it's really an excellent example. All right, we're going to move back down the street
Emily,
just a little ways.
There was a question about your precise location.
We are on 4th Street and 3rd. 4th Avenue and 3rd Street. Yeah. 4th Ave and 3rd Street. Sorry, I hope that makes sense. Okay.
Between 2nd and 3rd, right?
Between 2nd and 3rd, yes. And I think this is one of the best collections of architecture in St. Pete. Really diverse architectural styles. All right, now we're going to stop here at the Vernon Apartments. This is another classic example of a tourist apartment we have in St. Petersburg. Winter tourists would come year after year to the same apartments, and the apartments would be small. They were really only for small functional apartments that you would live in just the winter. And they also formed the basis of their social life in St. Petersburg. You would have music groups with your apartment. You'd invite other apartment buildings over for tea or cards or reception. So it really was a way to form a social connection in this new city you were in and spending time in. This was built by Edward Sarvin in 1922. He was actually a commercial builder. So he planned to build this building, but he died just after it was constructed. His wife took over managing this apartment and managed it from when it was built in 1922 to when she sold it in 1922 to a Mrs. McVeigh. This is also really typical in St. Pete. An appropriate job for an upper middle class white woman was to manage an apartment building or manage a small hotel. And so we have examples of women throughout St. Petersburg managing the hotels. And I really think that that is a big reason why we have so many women involved in so much in St. Petersburg, is we had a strong community of business women in St. Petersburg. Now, let's look at the style of this building for a minute. This building is considered a classical revival style building. It was built 17 years after our Davenport house over here. So in 17 years, you can see the style has really changed. It's not ornate, it's very simple, very straightforward, it's symmetrical, the same on either side, rational. And then we have these massive Doric columns that make you think of a Greek temple. So that's what the idea of classical. When we say classical, we're thinking classical Greece and classical Rome. A great example of a classical style building, very restrained. All right, we're gonna walk, Monica, if you wanna show the next couple of slides as we walk down to the next building.
Yep, we'll
see
get
a slide of this one and then the Mount Vernon.
Do you want the Mount Vernon up now or when you get down there?
Yeah, you can show, first you can show the Sarvin and then you can show the Mount Vernon.
And the Sarvin doesn't look like it's changed really at all.
Yeah, no, it's great. I don't think it has.
Yeah. And then there's the Mount Vernon. A couple. We've got the ad for the Mount Vernon up as well. Emily, do you want me to talk about this first picture?
Yeah, if you would, that would be great.
So this first one that we've got here, this is actually a picture I found in a box of old photos that I inherited from my great grandmother, who was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I inherited probably 20 boxes of photos dating back to 1860s, all in Pittsburgh. Every picture was in Pittsburgh, hundreds, probably thousands of pictures. And then there was one small box that where clearly my great grandmother took a vacation in 1938 to St. Petersburg, Florida. And when I found this, I'd been doing tours in St. Pete for about 10 years. I had no previous connection to St. Pete. I moved here for graduate school. So the fact that my great grandmother took what looks to be probably her only vacation in her whole life to St. Petersburg, Florida, and took a bunch of photos of it. It also included photos of the green benches on Central and the Manatee, which was a ferry that went between here and like the Bradenton area. I thought that was kind of fitting that the only vacation she seemed to ever take, she took to St. Pete, and she stayed right here in the Mount Vernon Apartments. And the next photo is an ad from when it first opened, which I think was, she took the trip in 1938. I think it opened 37, something like that.
Yeah,
and then
37.
The picture of it. So, and then I assume you'll comment on its being modeled after Mount Vernon, which we have the picture of up now.
Can you show that? You show that picture of Mount Vernon?
Yep, it's up right now.
Okay, great. So this building was modeled after Mount Vernon. It's designed in the colonial revival style. Obviously, we're talking about the American colonies here. And it's a time in the 1930s and 40s when Mount Vernon was really popular to model after. The irony is the picture of Mount Vernon that you see is a picture of the river facade. And that's really the facade I think a lot of people think of when they think of Mount Vernon. That has actually been removed from Mount Vernon because it was considered, it's actually been an addition after George Washington lived there. So it's no longer there, but it's certainly the facade we think of. And it was the facade that this building has been designed after. This building, like I said, was built in 1937 by a gentleman named Morgan Savage. He went back and forth. He managed a hotel in Minnesota in the summer, and then he came and managed the Mount Vernon, this small hotel here in the winter. So this hotel would have only been open probably November to April or May. And then, like his guests, he would transfer up to a climate more conducive to living in the summer and would be in Minnesota in the summer. like I said, it looks very much like that picture, or resembles a picture of Mount Vernon. And in this classical revival, it's symmetrical, extremely symmetrical. We have the light over the window, or the window over the door is called a fan light, as well as side lights, which are common features, as well as the floor to ceiling doors that you would have had, that Mount Vernon had, that opened up, and these have to open up as well. This building has social rooms like all the hotels of the time. This building also has a full basement because we are relatively high. We're at about, I think they said 37 feet here. So it's a relatively high space in St. Petersburg. So we have a kind of a nice, nice little hill we've come up here. All right, we're going to continue down to one more building, another one that I really think is great, and one I think that gets missed a lot. It's kind of hidden behind the shrubbery here, but it's such a great building.
Emily, one of our participants is very grateful for you doing this tour and bearing the heat so that they don't have to, and they still get to see all these places.
It's warm, but it could be worse today. It could be worse. I'm glad we're doing it in the evening. All right, this is the Bussey home. It was built by the Bussey family in 1904. The Busseys are interesting. They came to St. Petersburg, and Mr. Bussey was a funeral director. So he was in the business of a funeral director, and that was a pretty important business in St. Petersburg at the time. The funeral director also had a wagon, or could haul caskets and bodies, I guess, and, prepared for embalming. So this was, pretty significant home business. And his business was over on 4th Street at about 4th Avenue. Along with his home, they built this home in 1904. And it was located on 4th Avenue. 4th Avenue began to grow. It became much more of a commercial strip, Central Avenue, 4th and Central. It became much more of a commercial strip and really not much of a neighborhood. So the Busseys had this house moved to a more appropriate neighborhood. This turns out was incredibly common. It was moved in 1913. In 1913, I've discovered a number of ads for house movers, as well as in 1912, the city tried to pass an ordinance that was going to limit the house moving taking place. All house movers, they wanted to be bonded, and they also wanted house movers to not cross any brick streets because they were causing too much indentation in the streets. But the house movers protested, and it didn't pass. So they continued moving houses throughout St. Pete. This house, it looks really massive, but all of these older homes, they don't have a solid foundation. They're actually built up on piers, which you can't really tell, but you can see there's sort of brick underneath. So you can slide I-beams underneath these houses, jack them up, and transport them around the city. So this house is designed just like the Davenport house in the Queen Anne style. Notice the incredible lathe work, the woodworking that was all done on these mechanical lathes here. You can see the balustrade is so detailed, as well as up above on top. I'm not sure if you can see it all, but a really great example of fish scales up high as well. And this house also has a wraparound porch. So the porch, you see the fish scales up there? It's kind of hard to get among the trees. But this porch wraps around, and that's significant because you can always find shade on a porch like this. So the idea was you could always find a breeze and find the shade when you have a porch that wraps around your building. Porches were great for keeping people cool, but they also were an important part of your social life. You could sit out on your porch, and cars aren't zipping by. Instead, folks are traveling back and forth by foot, by horse and carriage, by slow moving car eventually. This is really how you got to see your neighbors. You chatted with your neighbors. This was a big part of your entertainment, was sitting on the porch and watching your neighbors go by. So I think that's, we all know porches are great, but that really was an important part of your community. All right, we're going to travel to one more house here before we look at some more slides.
Emily, tell me, we had a question about what year the Sarvin apartment was built, but if you can remind us what the years of all the
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think that's really great. So we started out 1910 with the Villard house, 1903 with the Davenport house, The Sarvin was 1922. Then we go all the way up to 1937
Right.
for the Mount Vernon, back to 1904. But it was not, but it was moved here in 1913, so it wouldn't have been here in 1904, but
Okay.
a 1904 house. And now we're at the Chryslip, which is 1926.
Okay. And Emily, why do you have any theories on why they were moving so many houses?
You know, I think it was easier to do. You know, it wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
And I also think building materials were very expensive. So you didn't want to demolish a building and waste all the building materials. You had spent all this money building a house and you wanted to still have it. So you were able to pick them up and move them. So the way they're constructed, they're fairly easy to move, but I think a lot of it has to do with the cost of building materials.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
All right, so now we're looking at the Chryslip house, which again is 1926. It was built by the Chryslip family, which was responsible for the Chryslip Arcade, which is on the 600 block of Central Avenue. If you're familiar with the great, active, engaged block of the 600 block, that was built by, the arcade was built by the family that lived in this house. It was designed in what we call the Mission Revival style. The Mission Revival is sort of the Florida and California's answer to the colonial revival, because our colonies, were Spanish missions. So it takes its inspiration from a Spanish mission. You'll find them occasionally outside, in other areas, but primarily this is the style you'll find in the California, the Southwest, as well as in Florida. What makes it mission, if you look at the parapet roof, the shape of the roof there, it looks vaguely like a Spanish mission. So that's where we get the idea of the mission. You think of a mission roof, that's where it comes from, as well as the red barrel tiles, which would be common in a Spanish mission, as well as the use of stucco. But mission style kind of blends into some other styles as well. We have usually massive brick piers like we have on this one, as well as you can see the brackets around the roof, the very prominent brackets. And that's the idea of, you're supposed to see how this building was constructed. So it's constructed, those are where the roof beams are supposed to be. And that's what gives it the brackets there. All right, can you show the pictures right now?
Yes.
Did that work,
Yep.
Monica? Okay,
Yep.
good.
I get them going. This first one is an ad from the Bussey Funeral Directors and Embalmers that you were saying was such a big business, and that they were also the house movers. There's that ad. The Chryslip Arcade, which was so beautifully restored, 10 years or so ago. And then there's a picture of it kind of active with people. And then I think that next one is maybe at the next site you're going to be going to.
Yep.
So we'll
let's go ahead and show. We go ahead and show
you
the next one.
that?
I think
Okay.
Yeah, we may as well show it now before we see it.
Okay.
The Carle Eve Apartments. So this is the Carle Eve Apartments, and you want to show the ad for the Carle Eve too?
Okay. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So the Carle Eve Apartments, I really like, because they're unusual in St. Petersburg. The Carle Eve were built in 1939. At a time when we weren't doing a lot of new construction in St. Petersburg. It's designed in what we call the Art Moderne style, which is kind of vaguely in the art, falls into kind of the Art Deco category. So it has a little bit of a look of an Art Deco. If you're familiar with Miami Beach, think of all the wonderful zigzags, but also the massing of the two-dimensional part of this building. Is very indicative of the Art Moderne style. And we have just a few of those here in St. Pete. So I love this one. The idea too in an Art Moderne is the building is very smooth. It's actually used a kind of brick called Belden block, which is a really smooth brick, and it can be laid with very little mortar in between it. So it gives it that very smooth feel. And then all the windows have been replaced, but you can see how the corner, they would have been steel frame windows, and they would have turned the corner. So really a very common hallmark. And then I don't know if you can see into the front of the building here, kind of where it's white, the details. We have some great detail to it, but it's two-dimensional. You think of the buildings we've just seen that have things sticking out and projecting. This is all really smooth is the idea, smooth and streamlined. This building was built by Carle and Eve Perenza, and guess how they got the name of the Carle Eve? Carle and Eve smashed their letters together and it became the Carle Eve. It was built, actually, and this is interesting too. It was started in August of 1938 and completed in January of 1939. So this was built really quickly, built building. And it featured card rooms and tea rooms, and really, I think was quite a lovely place to stay. We're gonna now travel down to the Fleur de Lyon. Monica, do you want to show the rest of the pictures while we do that?
Yeah. And Emily, what is that building now, the Carle Eve?
It's a retirement community for, I believe, Catholic priests.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you wanted me to go on to the Huntington pictures?
Yes.
Okay. So we're looking at a couple different postcard views of the Huntington Hotel. Are you going to be standing in front of that, Emily? Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm not going to stand in front of it because it's not there anymore.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
The Huntington Hotel is right on the southern corner of 4th Street, or was on the southern corner of 4th Avenue and 2nd Street. It was built in 1898 and it was demolished in 1897 and replaced with townhomes that are referred to as the Huntington townhomes.
In 1997.
Excuse me. Yeah, 1997.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That may be what you said. I may have misheard you.
Okay. So yeah, but so it was quite the hotel to stay in. Now you're looking at some pictures too. Let's go ahead and show a few of these pictures right now, real quick.
Yep, I got.
We're gonna see the Flory. Great. So you can see the apartment building of the Fleur de Lyon. I think that's the rear courtyard of the Fleur de Lyon. So you're seeing now some interior shots, some of the famous residents of the Fleur de Lyon. And then I like to point this one out because if you look at that arrow that's pointing, that picture is taken from basically at the yacht club. And you can see how much the Fleur de Lyon kind of stands up. I mean, it is much bigger than anything else around it when it was built. It's 7 stories. I mean, it's a giant skyscraper when it was built in 1927. So I like that picture because it kind of gives you an idea of the massiveness or how big this building felt at that time. Okay.
But not you can see now how the park shore next to it is so much taller.
And a very large building is supposed to go up next to it as well. But the Fleur de Lyon was built in 1926, between 1926 and 1927. It was built as co-op apartments, which is unusual in St. Petersburg. But the idea was that those who lived in apartment buildings, luxurious apartment buildings in other cities, didn't particularly want to come to Florida and have to live in a house. They wanted the ease of a apartment building, but they wanted the amenities that you would find in a hotel as well. So it was filled with amenities. It was 76 apartments. They ranged in size from efficiency apartments to 3-bedroom apartments. They came with maid service, a phone service in each unit, as well as a switchboard operator for the apartment building. And I also think they were fully furnished, but interestingly, all but the 3 bedrooms came with Murphy beds. So you could transform your living room into your bedroom at night, which I thought was a real selling feature. And I found that very interesting. It also has a number of famous residents over the years. It has a real association with baseball. Some folks are aware of the Yankees that trained here in the 1930s. On one side, we had a penthouse where Babe Ruth lived. And on the other side was a penthouse where Lou Gehrig lived. And what's really interesting is the stories, it seems to bear out that the Lou Gehrig was very private and he wanted his elevator to go. The elevator stopped at the 6th floor. He wanted the elevator to his apartment to go to the 7th floor. So he agreed to pay for the cost for rebuilding the elevator. And apartment 701 to this day pays the taxes for the 2nd elevator. So that's kind of interesting. It's designed in what we call the Mediterranean revival style. The idea was really, you kind of first promoted of exotic architecture. You want something really different when you go on vacation. And Henry Flagler was great at this. His railroads up and down the coast had these exotic style apartment buildings or exotic style hotels. The idea was, why go to the Mediterranean when you can go to Florida? So, why go to the Mediterranean when you can go to St. Pete? And you think of kind of the iconic style associated with St. Pete is this style of the Mediterranean, the Vinoy, the Don Cesar, all of these buildings are designed in this style. What makes it Mediterranean is, first of all, I mean, the colors can change, but they tend to be the colors of the sunset, the colors that you think of in the Mediterranean. We've got projections. We call them an additive building. So it looks like it's been added onto over time, but really it's just, designed that way with projections. Courtyards are very important in Mediterranean architecture. I think we've got a fabulous courtyard in this building. So we have this courtyard here, and we also have a back courtyard. It's actually designed in the H shape so that all units have air coming in from both sides, and you can always catch the breeze. You look up on top of the central tower, look at the tile work we have, very ornate tiles around it, ornate cast stone. But we even have a little dome on the top to kind of give it even more of that Moorish, Spanish, Mediterranean feel. Look at the tile work on either side. This building is a locally designated landmark as well. It also has a really great community. You have to be 55 or older to live here, but they get together all the time. They have a policy, if you leave your door ajar, that means you're open for visitors. So anybody whose door is ajar, you can come in to visit. They also are really proud of their history. They have a whole heritage committee and a heritage room inside where you can come and see the history of this building. All right, that's the last one we're going to talk about today. I hope you feel like you've learned a little bit of how to read the city. And when you're traveling throughout St. Pete, you too can now look at various buildings and understand their history, talk about the architecture from what you've learned here today. And if you're interested in architecture, Monica, I have one last slide there. It's my Bible for how to read a city or how to identify buildings.
Yeah,
it's called A Field Guide to Domestic Architecture. I have a copy. I have several copies of this, but boy, is it tattered. I use it all the time in identifying it. It goes through every style in America and gives you kind of ways to identify it. So just like a bird identification guide, a field guide for birds or field guide for plants, there's a field guide for buildings that architectural historians like me get all excited when we can go around the country and identify various buildings and read the city. So thank you so much to I Love the Berg for doing this and letting Preserve the Berg partner. And if you're interested in live tours, Preserve the Berg will be starting our live tours up in the fall. You can go to Preserve the Berg's website or our Facebook page and find out about when we're giving tours. And we also are starting our in-person event. So a week from today, we'll be having an in-person event at Lang Court. So tickets are still available at the Preserve the Berg website or on our Facebook page as well. So thank you all so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. This is terrific. Great to see you.
Thank you, Emily and Monica. Everyone have a good day.
All right. Bye, Isa.